Hello everyone. In today's session, we are going to dive deep on the concepts of creation of table. Today's session is intended only to discuss on the basic elements or concepts that are needed for the creation of the table. There are other concepts which are needed for creation of table, or in other words, which are useful for table creations like enhancement category, table maintenance generator. All these concepts will be discussed separately on the subsequent videos because it's very important to understand the significance of those concepts. So in today's session, we will discuss only on the basic elements that are needed for a table creation. In short, the table creation is a process and that needs to follow through a certain steps. The first of which is decide on the fields that are to be part of the table. So this is where you get involved with your functional consultant in business and decide on which type of fields are required as part of these tables. And the second important one is decide on the data elements and domains that needs to be assigned to the table fields. Let's say you have found out the fields. Now you want to understand what will be the data type of each fields. Okay. So in this case, I have already created data elements and domains just to save time. And if you want to know in detail about the data element and domain concept, I have already released certain videos on the same, discussing in deep about the data and element and the domains. The description contains those links as well. It will be useful for you. Please stop this video right here, go through those concepts if you don't know, and then come back here so that you will find this video more relevant and useful. In the next step, go to S11, provide a suitable table name starting with Z, because it's very important. All your custom tables starts with Z, Y, or any other SAP provided character, because you cannot create any other table directly like a student or something like that, because any table that's created without Z or Y is considered as an SAP relevance table, and it will get stored only in SAP package. It will not get stored in your custom package. And most of in your developer life cycle, you will always end up in creating custom tables. Okay. And then assign a delivery class, which we will see in few minutes, and table editing options, we will see that concept as well. Assign the fields that needs to be part of the table. Yes, the above desired fields needs to be assigned here. And then assign the desired data elements for the field. Yes, the above desired data elements needs to be assigned. Maintain the technical settings, syntax check, and activate. Now, as I told you, all these steps are sufficient enough for a successful table creation. The other concepts will be discussed in the subsequent videos. Now let's not waste any time and let's directly jump on to table creation concepts. So in today's class, we are going to create a table called Z student. Okay. As I told you, it's very important. The table name should start with Z or Y. So I have decided to start with Z and I click on create. The first and foremost thing is providing a description for the table. I provide the description as student table, student data maintenance. Okay. Now the delivery class. Now if you press F4 on this particular field, you will get a lot of options for the delivery class. However, in our real-time business case scenarios, most of the times we will always create application table, which can be either a master or a transaction table. There are very few instances where we go for a customizing table. The remaining all other delivery classes are not very frequently used. So I'm not going to spend time explaining on all those delivery classes. We are just going to concentrate on the application table, which can be either a master or a transaction table. In our case, since we are maintaining the student entries, which is part of the master table, so I'm going to select the delivery class A. The remaining concepts about delivery classes, I'll try to put in my upcoming videos. So for now, let's stick to A. Now, data browser or table view editing. So this is where you provide authorization for others and for yourself on editing the entries of this table. So there are 4 different options: display and maintenance allowed, display and maintenance not allowed, only display allowed, and display and maintenance allowed with restriction. So in short, here you are providing authorization for maintaining entries in the table. So the significance of each of this will be discussed in our subsequent videos. For now, let's stick with display and maintenance allowed and proceed further. I'll be using the same table in my subsequent videos as well, so that the concepts get blended with you as I explain. Now moving on to the next tab which is called fields. So here there is an important concept before we decide on the fields that we wanted to input. In the first step, it's always necessary that we input MANDT, which is a client field, and we provide the relevant data element. Now, why is it important to have the client field as the first field? Just when you maintain the client field as the first field, SAP database understands this table as a client dependent table, which means if you maintain an entry in this table, it will be available only in this client, and it will not be available in other clients of the same system. So to understand the differences between a client dependent and client independent, I have discussed the same concept in another questionnaire series. I'll paste that link as well. You can go through and understand it better. So for now, just to ensure this table is a client dependent, I am maintaining MANDT as the first field, and this will also be the case in all the tables that you create in your development lifecycle. Okay, as a developer, when you create any custom table, you will always be expected to do this. You will always be expected to give MANDT as your first field. Okay, so I provide MANDT as the first field. Then I'll start with the table creation. I will provide the same fields that I gave in the PowerPoint presentation. I'll use the same fields. So first is student ID. Next is student first name, and I will provide the same first name. And then next is student last name. So this will be the last name. Just for easier friendly approach, I'm using both data element and the field name as same. Okay. Next is department. So here I'll be using department, and yes, this will be the department. Now if you see here, initially none of those hold any values, but as soon as I press enter, you can see the values, the data types and lengths are automatically getting populated. Now you can check the same with this fees field. Okay, if you see here, I'm providing the fees field and I'm providing the data element for that. Now you don't see any data element length or decimals, etc. As soon as I press enter, all these values gets populated. Now where these values are coming from? Now for now I'll just save this and I will explain you more about this data element and domain concept. Again, to get a deeper understanding, please go through my previous videos. For now, if you see here, ZST ID, if I get into this, here I have maintained this data element description as student ID, and this is what is getting displayed here. Now if you see the domain of this particular data element, it is called KUNNR, which is referred as customer number. But why did I choose such domain? Just because the data type and the length of this particular domain is relevant to my field as well, I'm choosing that domain and I'm creating my own data element so that I can differentiate the field for my own business purpose. It will be best understood in the next two examples. See the first name and last name. If you see the first name, the domain is zname. If you see the last name, the domain is zname again. Both of them share the common domain. By then, how am I differentiating them? It's through this data element. Now if you see the data element, the short description here, it is called first name, and last name short description is called last name. So you can understand it deeper in my other videos. For now, this should suffice for us to proceed further. Now this department also has a significance. Let me explain it a bit later stage of this video. And then if you see the ZFees field, I have mentioned the data type as currency. Now this currency data type has a significance. I'll explain it in the later part of the same video. Okay. Now first step is finished. Fields decided, data element decided, and now delivery class is given, table editing option is given. Now assigning the fields that needs to be part of the table is done, assigning the data elements is done. Now maintaining the technical settings. So how do you go to technical settings? More, and click on technical settings. So here you have a data class. I'll press F4 to understand what is a data class. As I told you, here again it is possible entries. What are the type of entries that's gonna be used here? So whether it is a master data and transparent table, whether it is a transaction data and a transparent table, whether it is an organizing or customizing data. So these are all the different classification or different type of possible entries that are expected to be loaded into this table. So in our case, it is just going to be a master data and it is going to be a transparent table. So as if you remember, the first step we chose A for both master and transaction table. But here in this data class, you have an option to separate two different options. One is for master data alone, Another is for transaction data. Now, why we need to choose this separately? Why the database table should explicitly know that whether it's a master or transaction data? Because the table will have its own functionalities when it is getting created in the database, and in a master data, the frequency of the changes will be less, whereas in a transaction data, the frequency of the changes will be more. So the database table will get created in the database knowing these parameters, knowing these concepts, so that it will be easier when we perform maintenance, when we perform entry maintenance on this table on the later stage. It has many further significances as well. But in this session, let's stick to the table creation part and choosing APP-L0 as the delivery class, data class, because master data is the table that we're going to create and it is going to be a transparent table. So I'll choose one. Now the size category. The size category, you can choose the number of data records that is expected out of this table. Ultimately, none of us would know in the initial stage what is the expected number of entries. However, it's important to choose one, because when I choose say 1 or 2 or 0, by default the table will assign that many amount of space that's needed for this particular entries. Okay. Now when this complete entries gets used up, the database will assign the next set of same entries. Like for example, if I choose 0, the database will assign the table to hold 3000 entries. Once I complete 3000 entries, the database will again reserve another set of space to store next set of 3000 entries. So it doesn't mean that you can store only 3000. It means that you can store data until 3000 and you will always have next reserve for next 3000. So the database reserves the temporary, or in other words, the database reserves the memory part to store in your database in the selected clusters here. So for now I am selecting a cluster of 1. So 3000 to 12,000 will be the cluster that will be stored for me as and when I complete the allotted storage. Okay. So the buffering concept is something, it's completely different, and the buffering concept I'll discuss separately in another video. The data changes, again, in case if you want to know about the logs that's happening in this table, like who stored the entry, who made changes to this database table. If you want to know the logs of the table activities, you will check that. Most of the cases we don't. In our case also, we are not going to do it. I have maintained this, I have saved it. Now I'll come back, and here I will first check the syntax check, and if you see here, I'm getting 2 errors. The first one, we need to have a primary key. Of course, a table should have a primary key, without which the existence of a table itself is not valid. The second one, specify reference field for this field alone. Now, in the first step, choosing a primary field is pretty easier. Always choose your client field as primary, and then in our case the student ID is the primary key field. So I'm choosing this primary key. Now again, if I check, one of the error will be gone. Okay. And first I'm saving it and then I'm checking it. One of the error is gone and another error is still there, providing a reference. Now why is it asking for a reference? You have chose a field called currency field. Now for a currency field to exist, it's very important that you need to have a field based on which this currency is measured. Like a currency field, in other words, will only have numbers. But what is the unit of measure for this currency? System or table needs to know that. So that's the reason we need to provide a reference for this currency field. So if I go to this tab, currency and quantity fields, here if you see all other fields don't ask for any reference because they don't need, because they are just a character field. But this being a currency field, it's very important that we provide reference. So I'm providing a reference from different table, and if you watch carefully, if I double click on this particular field and if I get into it, this field is nothing but it is a reference for this currency field. So I'll just show you what this field means in the other table. This VBAK is the field, the table that we are choosing as a reference, and in VBAK we are referring to WAERK field. WAERK field. Now if you see here, this WAERK is the currency value, like whether it is an INR, whether it is an USD, whether it is a AED. So this particular field helps in referring the currency that for which you are maintaining the current, which is you for which you are maintaining the actual amount value. Okay, so this you can always refer to a different field in a different table, or you can maintain a currency key field here and you can use that as well as a reference. So in our case, I'm using a reference from different table. So hope you understand the significance of this currency and quantity field tabs. Okay, this input and help check. Now if you see here, this input and help check, all the fields are bit pretty empty, and this particular field, department field, has input help with fixed values. Now what does this mean? Now if you go to this fields and if you get into the domain of this particular department, we will have this fixed values maintained here. So which means that this particular field cannot have any other values other than that's maintained in the fixed values of this domain. Again, this domain fixed value concept is something you are restricting the user to not maintain values anything other than expected values. Now in this case, they all belong to a particular college or an educational institution, and they know their departments that are present in this organization. So they wanted only students to belong to any of those departments that are present in the organization and not anything else. So that's the reason we have maintained this fixed values, and that's the reason you are getting this support here. It's origin of input help, or in other words, this explicitly tells you, this input help is with some fixed values, means this field can hold only those values that are present in the fixed values of the domain. Okay, now we have cleared both the errors. Now let me check again. If you see, I will still get one warning. This enhancement category for table missing. This is just a warning because it's politely asking us to maintain the enhancement category, without which also we can still go ahead and activate the table. Now, I'll explain this enhancement category concept and other important concepts like TMG in my next video. For now, we will choose to ignore this warning and we will try to activate. So the table gets activated. Again, it will warn you again for the same error, or in other words, the same warning, but the table gets activated. If you see here, one important concept to understand, errors will not allow you to create tables. However, with warnings, you can still go ahead and create tables. That doesn't mean that you can always ignore warnings. No, that is not the point. Warnings are also very integral part of any operations that you do in the SAP screens. However, I wanted to explain that concept in detail in my subsequent videos. That's the reason I'm choosing to ignore it. So yes, we have created our table successfully. So in my next videos, I will explain you the significance of enhancement category, table maintenance generator, and the data browser table view editing different options. Thank you all, and peace and blessings to all of you.